Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Brian Roche, and today I'm very excited because I get to talk about something I feel very passionate about. Lean startup, running lean, extreme development, and digital transformation, most importantly. So I am fortunate enough to meet a lot of different people in my travels and talk to them about transformation and the need to change. And many people say, well, the world is changing, but what we're doing is working today. No need to dramatically overhaul what we're doing. And some people say, well, isn't the meteor hitting the Earth a tad dramatic? And so we've all heard the analogy that Mark Andreessen, the premise of the article he wrote 5 years ago, that software is eating the world. And so I won't use that one. I'll pivot to a different one. And I'll talk about platforms eating the world. Today we are welcoming people into our homes. We are welcoming people into our cars. And Facebook is arguably the biggest media company, and they don't create any media. So I can't think of an industry that hasn't been affected and infected by software. And so the world is indeed moving at a faster pace. Mark was indeed correct. But a lot of people are continuing to, continue to work in the same work patterns. They're not changing. And I think the ramifications of this will be significant. Some folks may face extinction. Now, again, people will say, well, Brian, that's a tad dramatic. And I'll say, well, in the 1960s, the average lifespan of a company on the S&P index was 60 years. The average lifespan on the S&P index today is 12. So is the world changing? It is indeed changing. Is it all doom and gloom? It's not. And I'm here to tell you today that there is a better way, and that better way is to learn by doing. That's exactly what we did 1 year ago when we embarked on our journey to transform ourselves, to transform our team, and to transform our company to a new way of working. And that's what we'll talk about today. So a few logistics. We are here, and the benefit of this session, or a session like this, is the thoughts that it provokes, the discussions that we have afterwards. And I'd like to welcome all of you to come to the Global Solutions booth and the EMC Dojo booth downstairs, or on this, whatever floor we're on, the booth pavilion. Come join us so we can talk to you about not only digital transformation, not only to have a deeper discussion about our transformation and what we've done to be successful, but also to talk about the transformative products and projects that we've been able to create with this new way of working. Now, I've been with EMC for approximately 12, 13 years, and I've been fortunate enough to lead many different engineering teams. And in that period of time, I've tried to adopt lean strategies for delivering software, as we all have. I used to call myself agile. We used to do iteration stand-up meetings. We used to do scrums. But I would say I've had varying degrees of success. So what have we done today? What has been different? 12 months ago, our journey looked a little bit like this. And very often people will say to me, how can we adopt TDD, test-driven development? How can we have better automation? And the simple answer is there's no magic. You have to do it. You have to take the first step, learn by doing, and continue to adapt. And that's what we've done. So our first step was opening the first EMC pivotal Cloud Foundry Dojo. One of the first questions people ask me is, what is a dojo? Do you practice karate there? Taken from karate, dojo is known as the place of the way. In karate terms, you're practicing Ishin Ryu, Taekwondo, Shotokan, whatever your style is. It's a place where you're practicing your art and you're refining your skills. In this new world, this is the place where we practice modern software development. This is where you'll see extreme programming in action. This is where if you come to the dojo in Cambridge, you'll see us continuously delivering every 5, 7, 10 minutes. Now we had some other goals. Obviously the first one was to contribute to open source Cloud Foundry, the best cloud native app platform out there. And we also wanted to train new Cloud Foundry committers. And then of course we wanted to take this new way of working, these new work patterns, and evangelize those across the rest of EMC and to our organization. So we could, in the same way that software is changing our lives, infect our own company and go through our transformation. And we are transforming just like many of you. So this is where we're going to start to dive into what did we actually do? What are the steps of transformation? What did we embark on, and what really changed it for us? I'll talk a little bit about pair programming, TDD, continuous delivery, and integration. And all of the ingredients, all the way through to more of the superficial, but arguably the most important, how do we achieve a balanced team? How do we truly embrace DevOps? Now, anyone at Pivotal or Pivotal Labs, and I will tell you that we've worked very closely with them during our transition. They have helped us a tremendous amount. They will tell you at the heart of their success, the secret to what they do is pair programming. So unbeknownst to ourselves, that's where we started in the EMC Dojo about 12 months ago. All right, so before we start talking about the new world and the changed place, because it's very easy for me to be 12 months on and to look back and forget the place that I came from, let me introduce you to a fictitious character named Jackie. Jackie started at her company as a software engineer. Very successful in her career. She's been promoted. She's taken on what I would describe, or she would describe, as the A-team. For all intents and purposes, she has a team of rock stars. There's nothing that they can't take. There's nothing they can't implement. There's no land that they can't find. There's nothing that they can't implement. And if you stop them in the hallway and ask them what they were working on, they would say, well, it's too complicated. I can't explain it to you. And then everything is going great for a few months until one day she gets a phone call from the CEO. It's not the phone call she'd always dreamed of getting. This application that everyone had derived value from, critical application for their business, is down. And as if her day can't get any worse, she says, like any great manager or leader, I'm going to pull my team together and I'm going to explain the problem. And she said, this is terrible. None of our customers can access the application. And what surprised her the most was how her team responded. One person said, well, it's not a big deal, right? This happens all the time. Just restart the server. Or it's not my responsibility. This bug is not my fault. It's QA's fault. It's their responsibility to test this. And she thought, well, if only there was a better way. And there is indeed a better way. But when I reflect on this situation, as I have many times, as I talk about our transformation, and I work with people to talk to them about what they can do to transform themselves, I think the missing key ingredient is empathy. Do we have empathy for each other? If we don't have empathy for each other, how can we possibly have empathy for the customer? How can product managers truly listen to our customers to understand their problems? And how can we genuinely implement a solution to those problems if we haven't truly listened? Our transformed world looks like this. This is the EMC Dojo in Cambridge. We work in pairs, and before I dive into talking about the advantages of pair programming, let me describe a little bit about what it is. Pair programming is the act of two software developers working together in front of one machine. They each have a screen, they each have a keyboard and a mouse, and they can both affect the direction of the code that they're working on. Very often, there's not two drivers. One is thinking about the strategic ramifications of the work they're doing, and someone else is implementing the code. So what are some of the benefits in our world? I think of pair programming as a high bandwidth knowledge share session. So we rotate frequently. Often we rotate in the morning, rotate in the afternoon, and sometimes more frequently. And I happened to attend a session yesterday where somebody said, is there an ideal pair? Is there an ideal switch off? And one of the things I say to people is, you'll find your groove. You'll know when you have momentum when you're working on something, and you'll know when it makes sense for you to switch off partners and maintain momentum. Now, in the situation where we were in the blame game with Jackie and her team, everyone on our team has shared context because we rotate often. They work in every layer of the stack. So when an issue occurs, it's just an issue. It's not a big deal. We're all going to work on it. We all have context, and it doesn't matter who takes the issue. And of course, it leads to better engagement. It's really hard to work with somebody every day and not be on your game and not be up to par. We move at a pretty consistent team. We are a balanced team who likes to move at a sustainable pace. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And of course, it leads to higher code quality. Now, in preparation for this presentation and other presentations, I always ask for feedback from the team. And many of us have come from other parts of EMC and other companies. And the one question, or the one thing that always comes up is, we would never go back. We would never go back to the old way of working. We would never want to sit in our cubes and not collaborate and not talk to each other. Step one, very important. Implement pair programming in your environment. It's the beginnings of empathy. Empathy is the key to delivering customer value and bringing your team closer together. So let's move on to the next step, TDD, and the benefits of TDD. Anyone experience with test-driven development here? Okay, so test-driven development is, think of it as you're describing the expected behavior. You're writing the test first, and then you're writing the implementation. And you're running the code again, you're running the test suite again, and when the test suite runs, we expect it to turn green. Arguably the most important step in all of this is refactoring your code. So many people will say, well, why do you refactor the code? You've written the test for the expected behavior, you've implemented the code to make that test work, and you've essentially got a green test suite, right? Why refactor the code? Well, we think of code as a liability. The more code we write, the more we have to integrate. The more code that we have to maintain over the long term, and it makes our test suites take longer to execute. And again, what are we all about? Speed isn't the only artifact, but we want to quickly get our deliverables into the hands of customers so we can determine, are we on the right track? Are we solving their problems? Or should we pivot? So it's not fair to say that every single line of code in our world is tested. But pretty much every line of code is tested because we're writing the test first, describing the expected behavior, and we're cleaning up that code so we're not writing any extraneous code. One important question I'm often asked is, well, why refactor? Why implement only as much code as you need to solve that problem? We may never come back. When we ask the customer to solve the problem, we may never actually come back to this code. So we don't want to write anything. What typically happens is you're writing an API. It's going to need, we're going to need CRUD. Let's just implement it right now. We're in here. Let's not just do create. We may never come back because we operate on customer feedback. And of course, it acts as our safety net. And the TDD framework becomes part of bigger test suites, not just the integration test suite, but other test suites that we run, all to validate, are we making breaking changes, or are we continuing to deliver customer value while maintaining the integrity of the code we've previously delivered? The continuous delivery pipeline. What enables us to get product to market quickly? We often talk about DevOps, and we talk about handoffs. Our goal is when the developer is finished writing the code, we want that to go into our integration pipeline, and we don't want any more intervention before it gets put into production. So we will optimize and optimize and optimize our delivery pipeline so that we can finish writing the code, run it through our integration, and deliver it to our customers, put it into production in essence. So steps are pretty simple, and you can think of this probably more as a circle. Happens all the time. Developers are constantly integrating their code because we want to ensure that the entire system is hanging together. So we're writing the code, we're integrating it, and we're getting feedback from our customers. Now, I'm sure you've worked in those projects where you've been on this project for 2 years, and it comes time to write the installer. And nobody can find the installer person. They're not here anymore. The installer is so out of date. Nobody has the expertise. We're good at shipping software because we do it all the time. Okay, so I often say that the worst thing that can happen is that you can release software and nobody cares. Has anyone ever released software and you put it out there and you completely missed the mark? Kind of ironic that the guy that's standing up here talking about transformation is telling you that he's failed in the past, and much of what we do and our failures in our past has informed the direction that we take. And much of what you do when you adopt a DevOps culture, you will adapt on the fly. You will continuously adapt your process and the way that you work. So a lot of people like to make fun of Waterfall, and I'm not going to make fun of Waterfall. I'm going to talk about the benefits. If we lived in a world where the requirements were well understood, if we lived in a world that was not changing, remember that world 10 years ago? You could innovate, you could find an idea, and then you could just milk it for a long time. Well, we don't live in that world anymore, right? We predicated this discussion by saying the world has changed, software has changed, pace to market may become your dominant value proposition if there is such a thing as sustainable competitive advantage in the new world. Yet many people continue to work in this pattern of waterfall where requirements are flowing down in phases and gates to the next phase. And in my research for this presentation on our transformation, I learned that, well, waterfall originated from manufacturing. And then I was disgusted to find out that the manufacturing folks had abandoned it because it didn't work, because Taiichi Ohno, arguably the godfather of the Toyota production system and lean manufacturing, said, you know what, where's the customer in our delivery process? They should be omnipresent, but they're not. So we learned a lot from Taiichi Ohno and Drew Dimming, who said the customer should be front and center, and we should be getting in front of the customer as quickly as we possibly can and removing every roadblock to get our product into that customer's hands so we can validate what we're doing. This used to be the traditional life cycle for a project of mine, where we would go to status meetings and we would feel very proud because we were moving from milestone to milestone with relative predictability. And some people say, well, what's wrong with this? We do this today, right? Well, what's wrong with this is potential waste, unvalidated effort or risk. You're implementing features, but you're not getting feedback from your customers. Are we really solving the problem? Because our goal, after all, is to build a sustainable market. And sometimes when I come and talk about lean startup and the next step of lean startup, which is running lean, the actual act of conducting customer interviews and creating a lean canvas and so forth, and people say, wow, I can't believe you talk about management and accounting, because that's what the lean startup is. It's management and accounting. How do we know that when two advanced development teams start at the same time, that one is making better progress or getting traction relative to the other? Innovation accounting. How can we determine that through our pivots or perseverance, that we're making progress? A team that has pivoted 10 times and is now on the path to building a sustainable product and monetizing their product is a team that's making having more success and being more successful over the long haul. So we want to employ innovation accounting to determine, are we pivoting, persevering, are we solving customer needs and solving customer problems? So I think of the build, measure, learn cycle as we're going to form a hypothesis. We think that this customer is going to have this problem. And within a day, we want to have conducted a customer interview to validate that they do indeed have this problem, build some software as little as we possibly can, and put it out there in their hands and ask them, did we indeed solve that problem for you? Why? Because when I look at my engineering team, and I'm sure you do the same thing, you have phenomenal engineers, right? You have those rock star teams. And the dominant question of our time is not, can we build a product, but should we build a product? Will this product lead us to a sustainable market? And many people say, well, that's cool, I get lean startup and I get, build, measure, learn, but what does MVP actually look like? And it looks like, anyone read the book Running Lean here? Okay, so it's about forming a hypothesis. We think that this customer has this issue. We're going to devise a set of questions, non-leading questions, and we're going to talk to that customer. And the outcome of that conversation will be, they have this problem, and we're going to write some software and put it in their hands, and then we're going to follow up with them that same day. Now, many people say, well, isn't this just for a startup, right? Because startups are looking at their funding is going to be gone in 3 months. They're burning through it, right? No, it's not. We all have to answer to people who fund us. We owe our customers, we owe our leadership, we owe everyone that we work with to make sure that we're on the right track and delivering customer value. Now, that's build, measure, learn, MVP. That is forming a hypothesis and proving it out and delivering software quickly. Let's talk about some of the other relationship aspects of adopting a DevOps culture and employing lean strategies. When I used to think back to my focus, I'd come in on Monday, we'd do our Scrum meeting, and we'd say, yes, this is the most important thing we have to do. But then I'd go back to my desk or my cube, and everyone would go back to their desk and their cube, and we'd all go work on other stuff. We'd be on Communicator, we would be in meetings, I'd have conference calls, and it'd get to the end of the week, and I'd look at my week and say, how did I do relative to what I said was the most important goal of this week? Not very well. We're not very good because we weren't focused. So what does focus look like in the dojo? Our typical day looks something like this. May look pretty boring. And it may look, and if anyone's done any research of lean manufacturing, I'm sure that you have if you're employing TDD, you'll say, well, this looks very much like a day in manufacturing, right? It's pretty consistent, okay? There's a lot of variability between 9:15 and 12:30 before we break for lunch. But look at what we do here. We co-locate teams. No more than 2 pizzas, okay? So small teams. You've heard that many, many times here at the conference this week. But we are focused. And the product manager, UX person, anyone that is required to deliver that feature to market sits with that team and they implement that functionality. Now, great things come in threes. And we only have 3 meetings a week. Every day we have our daily stand-up. We have our iteration planning meeting, which happens for about 30 minutes, roughly, at the beginning of the week. And then arguably the most important part of our week is our retro. And we'll talk about why that's important in our world. But what this represents is focus. And we move at a pace, for those, some of the folks in the room have visited the dojo, we move at a rapid pace. We talk to each other, we don't wait for meetings, we don't send each other communicator messages. In fact, our desks, we have shared workspaces, and they're all sprouted. We use Sprout as a tool to make sure that they all look and feel the same. There's no personal information on there, and we can rotate between desktops, and we often do frequently, because we reconfigure our workspace, the place where we work, and where we sit for the best customer outcome. So if we need 2 pairs or 4 pairs or whatever it is, we'll reconfigure our workspace and we'll put everyone that's needed to deliver that functionality in that same place. Now, remember this. Maybe some people are still living in this world where it's like, we're playing the blame game, right? Let's talk about empathy for a minute. Let's talk about balanced teams. Let's talk about self-driving teams. Let's talk about me as a leader within an organization who almost never gets what he wants because everything in our world goes to a vote and the team decides. And so if we choose to adapt our hours from 9 to 6 to 8 to 5, they win because I get overruled and I'm not a morning person, so that's a killer for me. But we have self-driving teams. And it's the complete opposite to this, where we have people in silos or people playing the blame game, ineffective communication, people with differing goals. So some people often say, well, how can you quantify that? How can I replicate the great team, the people that I see working together? How can we replicate that across my organization? And research was done about 5 years ago, talked to about 180 teams, and to try to achieve that goal, how can we find the qualities or quantify what makes a great team? And sadly, at the end of it all, there were no patterns. But after more than a year of doing this, and after having transformed ourselves, I'm here to tell you that there are qualities of great engineering teams. Those teams where everybody feels like they're being heard, where they feel like they have psychological safety, where we can depend on each other to work together to get our job and achieve our goals, get our job done. And this is where you want to be. Now, how does that actually work? Like, how do we keep that going every single week? Arguably, the most important part of our week, or the most important meeting, is our team retrospectives. This is where we employ whole team learning, where we generate real action. So this is where we'll sit down and say, hey, we had a pretty good week this week, but I think we can improve some things. It happens on Friday. Our iterations are a week long. Right before the weekend, we leave that baggage on the ground, we go into the weekend, and next week we have a changed process. And as someone who is trying to evangelize these new work patterns across all of EMC, people will say, well, why is your process not written down? And the answer to that is pretty simple. We adapt along the way. We learn by doing. We often call DevOps, or our transformed place that we're in today, as the way. Okay, but we think of it as all of those things: lean startup, extreme programming. And it's very effective, and I hope that you guys will adopt it. Now, process is just a means to an end. So what transformative technology have we been able to create out of this? You know, if you've ever tried to set up Go, it's like tribal knowledge, right? It takes you hours to set it up, got to get this library, that library. And when you think about that cost across all of your teams, how do we get an infrastructure in place? How do we get all of the developer tools that we need to be able to do our jobs, to achieve the most important goal? What is that goal? To push software to production quickly so we can focus on building our cloud-native applications on the best cloud-native app platform out there. Native Hybrid Cloud solves that problem. Gives you a turnkey solution and enables you to get your entire infrastructure configured so that you can immediately begin to CF push and derive value. Some other cool projects we've worked on, adding persistence to Cloud Foundry. 12-factor apps are way cool. We love Cloud Foundry. And we love the 12-factor concept, but we think there should be a place where all of your applications can live and work and experience the benefits of Cloud Foundry. So we've implemented persistence in a few different flavors. CephFS for the open source folks, and with Scale.io and Isilon. And we'd love you to come by the booth. Paul did a great presentation this afternoon on persistence, and we did a deep dive, but we'd love to share with you how you can move all of your applications and lift and shift them to Cloud Foundry. This is available today in PCF 1.8 in beta. Let's talk about the other frequent asks. Customers have said, we'd love to be able to run Cloud Foundry on bare metal. What do you got for us? Well, we open sourced RackHD, which is a management and orchestration tool, which abstracts all of the underlying hardware for you. We wrote the cloud provider interface, which now allows Cloud Foundry to work on top of RackHD, and you can experience all the benefits of bare metal. Two other cool projects that Paul talked about. If you're familiar with Ginkgo, the BDD framework that ONSI created for Go, we've created something similar for Java, Ginkgo for J. And then, of course, Spring content, the ability to work with unstructured file and folder content. Developers love Spring. We're at a Spring conference, and we love developers. So as fun and all as it is to write all those I/O streams, we've now taken all that work away and given you a library where you can work with your unstructured files and folder content. For the IoT folks in the audience, think of Project Unique. Unique is a collapse of virtual machines, containers, all into a unikernel, as much operating system as you need, tiny footprint. You're going to hear a lot more about this, I'm sure, in the future. And then, of course, we had a lot of help from our friends. And as you adopt this new way of working, these new work patterns, who can you go to? Well, there's two great groups of people you can work with. You work with Pivotal Labs if you want to adopt new work patterns and adopt to a lean startup approach to delivering software. And at the end of those engagements, you will leave with an artifact, great software. And then our EMC services team, who can go on-prem, work with you, help you adopt new work patterns, and of course, all of the tooling and capability that they bring to the table to enable you to break down your monolithic applications and move them to the new world. All right, with 1 minute left, let me summarize for you. When we put all of these pieces together, I really haven't talked much about DevOps. But I have talked about handoffs, and I've talked about aligning people around the same process. So what is DevOps? DevOps is bringing your entire organization, your entire team together so that you can rapidly deliver software, rapidly deliver value to your customers, and determine that you're on the right track. We truly are better together. Like us, I would bet that your evolution will happen from the inside out. And as you embark on these changes, it's often going to feel like you're diving into this cold lake. It's going to be cold initially. You'll get halfway. You might want to turn back. I encourage you, keep on swimming. Get to the other side. Because at the end of all this, what have we got? It's a new world. There is a better way. That better way is to learn by doing. And in the process, you get to transform your company, transform your team, and transform the most important asset of any team, which is yourself. And of course, I look forward to the great software and transformative projects that you're able to build with these new work patterns. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you spending time with me today. And we will be at the Dojo booth. Love to tell you more about the projects, but appreciate the time today.